Well, hello everyone out there. This is Kelly Donahue-Piro, and we've got Dave Siekman here for our first ever Agency Performance Partners podcast. Dave, how psyched are you to try this out?
I'm very psyched. This is exciting.
Dave, what's in the closet behind you?
Do you want me to open it?
I don't know. I don't know if we want to go there. This is the first podcast.
A future podcast will open the closet and see what's in there.
We don't want to get kicked off of Stitcher or iTunes for inappropriate.
It's nothing that's exciting.
Well, we are super excited here to bring our first podcast. We're calling this the Ridiculously Amazing Insurance Agent Podcast because our goal is to bring tactical strategies to agencies. So one of the things that we want to do on our podcast, just for listeners, you want to subscribe because we highly recommend that, is understand that this isn't going to be talking about like what the theory is, what the philosophy of insurance is, or what you should be doing. This is kind of getting in the weeds and getting it done. So Dave and I are going to do crazy things like role play different scenarios, talk about, how to confront the issues that are facing your agency, but actually go back and forth with step by step. So like if you're struggling with your staff having like cell phones on their desk or producers giving you excuses, we're going to dive deep into how to solve that. So please make sure you subscribe. We're going to do the podcast once a month. So it's like a hotly coveted item, something that you look forward to when you see your podcast list, just like I do. But before we begin, I think we got to introduce you, Dave, because I don't know if a lot of our public, I know that they know you exist, but I don't think they know you that well. So do you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, I don't have the fan base that you have yet.
It's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yes, I'm David Siekman. I live here in Massachusetts.
Don't hold that against him.
I know. I'm sorry. I know Kelly always tells everyone how we're Patriot fans, and I feel like that is the wrong direction to go. I've been in the insurance industry for 20 years. I'm a licensed agent here in Massachusetts. I've been working on the agency side for 12 years, dealing with staffing issues, working with sales and marketing people, trying to get them to sell and market using new strategies. So I'm really excited to be on board and really excited about our ridiculously amazing podcast that we're launching here today.
So here's the other cool thing is that Dave and I joke that we grew up in insurance together as if we met each other at the sandbox. But literally we kind of started our careers in insurance together and have had the pleasure of in miscellaneous different career fields before we do now. Working together, and he's hired Agency Performance Partners, helped us refine our sales program. So super psyched to have him on the team.
Hired twice.
Twice, yes, that's right. Two times. Well, and before that, you hired the company I worked for, so it's kind of like
right.
It's been a long-term relationship.
Right.
But what I'm psyched about, let's talk about where we're at. So this podcast is getting released the end of January. So maybe let's do a quick recap of what went down in January. So Dave, what's your January been like? Give the readers, the viewers a little bit of where you've been, what are you up to?
Sure. A lot of local agencies here in the Massachusetts area that I've been working with. And then the end of the month, we were out in Phoenix at the IAOA conference. So it's been a great month of meeting a lot of new agents and executing some of the strategies and some of the programs that we have.
And I don't know if you want to tell if there's any Massachusetts agents out there listening that we have a very special announcement for Mass agents, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We just got approved for a grant through the Workforce Training Fund. So two of our programs, our Apex Sales and our Apex Retention programs, are both eligible to be reimbursed 50% through the Workforce Training Fund grant. So that cost to you is only half of what it would be. Buy one, get one free, so to speak.
And so if there's anybody out there that knows of any similar programs in your state, let us know. We're glad to apply. I think that's awesome. And for me, I went to Houston, which is always fun when you're living in the Northeast to get out of the cold. We went to see our friends at Blue Marsh. So out on Martin Luther King Day, they hired us to come out and do a training, which, by the way, guys, there's 4 key days in insurance agencies that you can get away with shutting the whole office, right? Martin Luther King Day, President's Day, Columbus Day, Veterans Day. So those are more like bank holidays, but we highly recommend that agencies take us up on our offer to do training days those days because it's not stressful. You're not like trying to answer the phones and dive in on customers. You can shut down. It's like a bank holiday. A lot of the carriers are closed. Great day to do trainings. We still have some of those dates available for 2018, so make sure you let us know if you want to talk about that. Also, too, I had the pleasure of speaking at the Gary V event, the Agent 2021. Super cool. Just so you guys know, we practice what we preach. So Daniela on our team tweeted Gary V. That's how we got the opportunity to speak. So don't think that all the strategies we say don't work. They really do if you use them consistently. And then IAOA. I mean, how awesome was that, Dave? We saw so many great people. Got to have a selfie booth there. I mean, how crazy was all the pictures?
Yeah, it was incredible. People got a little over the top, I think, sometimes.
Hey, that's how we roll here. But our main topic of what we're talking about today is in conjunction with our January ebook. So for those of you guys who don't know, we do an ebook every month, chock full of free resources. So Dave and I always joke around like we give away more than we sell. So if you look at our website, you can almost run a whole strategy of running your agency, but it's always more fun to do it with somebody else, right? And Dave, you're kind of fun.
Kind of. All right.
So you can download that ebook. It'll be in the show notes. Check it out. But really, our topic today is what are things that you as a leader in sales, maybe you're a sales manager, maybe you're an owner, want to say to your sales team but just can't. So I always say that in your head, there's these things, right? Like, I can't believe you just gave me that excuse, or WTF is one that runs through my head a lot. But not totally appropriate, right, Dave, to say those kind of things to your staff, from what I understand.
No, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of reasons behind it. I mean, obviously, you can get yourself into, legal issues.
Oh, that EPLI stuff that people are supposed to sell, right? Yeah.
But more important than that, it's about putting them in a position to make them successful. And most of the things that kind of as people run through our heads when we hear bad excuses, we're stressed out. Most of those things, if we can reframe them in a more positive light, then we can actually create an environment that is conducive to selling more, as opposed to, a combative environment where people are looking to make an excuse instead of make a sale.
So I think that there's two types of managers, right? There's the one where they kind of keep their head in the sand and they avoid it, right? So they don't want confrontation. They don't enjoy confronting someone. And so what happens is that problem keeps getting bigger and bigger. It compounds itself, right? So if you avoid interacting with the salesperson that's not meeting their set goals, what happens 4 months from now? Well, one, they're mad because they're not making any money, right? 2, you're mad because you're probably subsidizing them. And the problem hasn't been resolved in any way, shape, or form. If anything, what you have to do to fix it is so much greater than just addressing it during month 1, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And then the second type of manager I see, Dave, I'm curious what you think on this, is the one that sort of overreacts. So all those things that are in your great ebook just come flying out of their mouth.
Right.
And we call that they're just doing all the punch, 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 but there's no kiss. So it's not kiss, kiss, punch, punch. It's just all, you suck, everything sucks. And that's a really tough place to work too, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of defensiveness to it. They don't want to have a conversation about why we're doing something. They don't want to think about, different ways to do it. It's kind of the my way or the highway type of thing. They don't want to hear even legitimate reasons why something might have gone wrong. So instead of trying to address the reason or try to figure out, is this just an excuse or is this a legitimate reason and something we have to tackle, they just go right to, I don't care, just do it the way I'm telling you to do it or whatever the case may be. And obviously what we want to do is, I think what you're saying is find the middle ground there and say, okay, you can't just bury your head in the sand, but being overly aggressive doesn't work either. So how do we thread that needle?
Totally. So how often, Dave, when you go into agencies, do you see this being a problem?
Well, I think it's all over the place, right? So you have, and even within the same agency, you might have 2 different managers that are reacting differently. So I think the strongest managers are the ones that when we go into them, where they're open to change, they're open to us coming in. What I do find in most agencies is more of that defensiveness where they're unwilling to change. They're unwilling to kind of look themselves in the mirror and say, okay, here's why things aren't going well. And a lot of it's on me, or it's the process I created or the system I implemented, and being able to, there's many managers out there that would would rather have it do it their way than admit that they might be wrong and make it more successful.
We're not even wrong, right? Just maybe that there's a better way. I think there's so many little things that are not right or wrong, but it's keeping the open mind, and it's keeping the idea that, my big theory in life this year is, how can I keep things as simple as possible, right? And so if we get a better result and things are simple, we're winning.
Right. You're right. A lot of times it's just tweaking the process to make it line up with what line up for success.
Yeah, and I think when the relationship deteriorates between management and sales, everything becomes like, it's like everything's being hidden, right? There's not a lot of transparency.
Right.
It's when you walk by, hey, how's your pipeline? Oh, it's big.
Right.
Like, big is not a number.
Not this month, but next month it's all coming in.
This, one more month, it's all in there. And you're like, well, what's that mean?
Right. But you're right. When there's that relationship, then you have the trust, and then you have that transparency, so that the sales reps are open to coming to you and saying, hey, my pipeline's down, versus trying to hide it or sandbagging policies at the end of the month because they're above quota and they're going to kind of push them into next month. It's about creating that better relationship for you to be able to work together to create more success.
So, Dave, I know that you've managed a lot of salespeople in your day. Everything from the young, right out of college kids to some seasoned professionals that, were definitely selling 60 to 70 policies per month in personal lines, it's crazy epic. Yeah. When you were managing them, like, what were some common challenges that you ran against that caused you to have that, like, hey, I really want to say this, but I'm going to bite my tongue. And, like, what was your process? Like, how did you take a deep breath, not let it fly out of your mouth, and reconstruct it in a really positive manner?
Yeah, it's similar, to be honest with you, it's similar to the tactic that we teach when you get an objection from a potential prospect, where the last thing that you want to do is tackle it head on, right? You want to kind of take it on the side and roll with it a little bit. So it's taking a deep breath. To me, the first thing that I'm trying to figure out is this legitimate reason, or is this, just a made up excuse?
Right, like, is it supported by evidence?
Right, exactly. So, 9 out of 10 times when somebody doesn't hit quota, it's because they didn't do something right? Because I've got, 10 sales reps, 9 of them are hitting quota, 1 isn't. I don't care what you say to me. 9 out of 10 times, it's your fault. Having said that, I still want to listen, because I don't want to just automatically react, because even if I'm 100% correct that they're just making up an excuse, being combative with them is not going to be conducive to a good relationship. So a lot of times it's about listening to what they're saying and then responding, just like we do again with an objection, specifically to what they're saying, and to help them figure out how to rule that out. And if a good sales rep is going to be open to having that conversation, and if they're not open to that conversation, they're probably not going to be around long anyway. But you need to make sure, as the sales manager, that you're doing it appropriately, so that you are around, and that those sales reps that are performing well and need your help and need your focus, that you have your time to help them be successful.
Totally. And then I think one of the things that we try to stress, I know a lot in the trainings that I do anyway, is I'm not mad if you didn't make your quota. I'm mad that you didn't book a meeting for me to strategize with you how to get there. Right. And there's a month where you miss by 1. I get that. No one's upset about that. It's the month where, you get to the end of the month, you're running the report. Somebody said, I'm fine. And then all of a sudden you get to the end, you're like, you're not fine.
Right.
Absolutely.
And you have that first weekly meeting and they haven't had any sales, and they said, don't worry about it. I've got, 20 in the pipeline, 10 of which are guaranteed to close next week. Your next weekly meeting, you've got 2 sales, and now your pipeline's up to 30. Mm-hmm. And then by that last weekly meeting, all of a sudden you can start to see, then they start to hedge a little bit. And they're like, oh, I don't know what went wrong. But they're never coming to you. They're never saying, either during your weekly meeting or at any other time, like, hey, can we sit down? I'm halfway through the month and I'm only 25% of the way to goal. What can we do to fix this?
Tell me where I'm going wrong. Can we listen to some recorded calls together? Whatever it is, it's that openness to try to achieve and not hide things, and not, it's just kind of being open. And I love that, because that's the way we all get better. And, we have a philosophy here. I'm never going to be mad at somebody for making a mistake, or I'm never going to be mad at somebody for not hitting a goal as long as along the way we're talking about it and I see a genuine effort to get there.
Right.
But hiding it never hits anywhere.
Yeah. I had an old boss who used to always say that the truth is never a problem.
Right.
Right. And taking that and applying that, mid-month when you're not hitting quota works a lot better than, coming to me on the first of the month and saying, oh, here's what happened last month. We need to be proactively going at it.
And then, one thing I think we could talk about too here is with sales managers is, and I'm sure you've experienced it, I've seen it, is that typically sales managers and agencies are either agency owners or they're also selling themselves, which means that their time is also very limited. So it can feel a lot to a producer, especially a new one, that everyone's so busy, I'm not getting the attention I need. And that can also kind of put a rain cloud on relationships, or I think provide a sort of BS but kind of valid excuse for a producer, right? So how do you handle something like that?
Well, I think, it starts with the sales manager. You definitely see this a lot where it can be hard to go from a producer to a sales manager or for a principal with, no salespeople to bringing on a salesperson, because you're making the assumption that they are as skilled as you are in order, in that area of sales. So I think that as a sales manager or a principal who's managing your salespeople, the first thing that you have to recognize is that managing salespeople is different from actually being in sales. So you have to react to your salespeople as a manager in a way that's going to put them in the best position to win. I think it's very similar to coaching. There's very few like superstars that end up being great coaches. There are a handful of them. But typically the better coaches are the ones that either never played or maybe they played at some Division III college, but because they look at it more as a manager, more as a coach. How am I going to get others to succeed instead of just expecting them to do what you did?
I think that's a really valid point too, because generally if you're a sales manager, it's because you're sort of gifted in that area. So it's not something you've had to work at. But for a lot of people, sales is a series of activities, right? You do X amount of calls, you get to X amount of quotes, you do the blocking and tackling and it comes along. But for gifted salespeople, they don't have to do that. It just sort of comes naturally. Now, they all have their own other shortcomings, which you can get into in a whole other podcast.
Yeah, that's next podcast.
Next podcast. What I think that the whole point is that you got to put each other in other shoes. I think that's what I'm taking away from what you're saying, is that there has to be an understanding. And I remember back when we first met at the previous company I worked for, I had a team member and he just said something that made the whole world align for me. And he said, you know what, Kelly, my job as your employee is to make you look good. And I just love that, because I kept trying to make everybody else look good and kept trying to get things done. Like I put a lot of energy into it. Right. And I just said, you know what, you're right. The better I look, the better you look. The whole cycle keeps going if we're going up the corporate ladder. Right. And I think that, for salespeople, it's like, hey, make your sales manager look good, right? If you're on the sales team, make your owner look good. Make him feel good when he's cutting your commission check every month. And you kind of think of it that way. It's like, I think one of the things that we're going to kind of conclude here and talking about is how do we make the whole thing simpler, right? I don't know about you, but I just walk into so many agencies where people spend so much time defending things versus actually like solving the problem, right? So if you didn't upload a signed app, I've seen producers spend 23 minutes explaining the reason why and defending themselves for like 23 minutes on why that app didn't get uploaded and how it wasn't their fault. And I just thought, if you prospected for 23 minutes, it would have been a much better use of all of our time. Right. So how can we break down that?
It's that martyr syndrome where they want to explain why they're right even though it failed, instead of just saying, okay, I made a mistake. What's the better way to do it? And moving on to more productive tasks and activities.
Right. And as a sales manager, you're on a fine line because you want to listen to them and maybe they have a valid point. But let's be honest, 90% of the time, it's really just trying to dig themselves out of a hole and coming up with some elaborate story. Like, I don't have children, but I know you do, Dave, and I'm sure sometimes you catch them doing something not right and they come up with some real doozies, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, they're salespeople by heart, right? So they're trying to sell you all the time, and they'll try to sell you on why they didn't hit quota, or sell you on why they didn't upload the document, according to procedure, and it's just in their nature. So, the better salespeople are probably the ones that are a struggle in this area, because they are constantly, trying to stay one step ahead of the curve there.
Yeah, and so I think as a manager, when you're dealing with the excuses of the day, you sort of have to just limit them and say, well, we don't deal with excuses here. It didn't happen. We're going to talk about how you're not going to let it happen again. I don't care how you got there. It just can't happen in the future. And save yourself that 23-minute conversation.
Exactly.
We can all recycle that time to something better. So Dave, just, in our conversation here, just to wrap up here, what were your main takeaways that you want to tell agents on how to handle that, what you want to say to salespeople and managing them? What are your major takeaways for agents?
Sure. I mean, I think the first one is to take that deep breath, and you can take that deep breath by listening. So listening does two things for you. It gives you a second to digest, and it also allows the other person to speak. And then it's similar. We didn't really talk about this, but I do want to make this point. There are only so many excuses in the book.
Right.
So if you can create a response for, those 8 to 10 general excuses that are going to come up, just like you create your responses to objections from prospects, then no matter what excuse somebody brings to the table, you have your way to deal with it. And you can pivot, again, just like we do in sales, and address what is actually occurring versus what they're trying to make up as an excuse. So to me, those are the two big things: take a beat and then pivot it to resolution.
Yeah, and I think my big takeaway is let's just stop the excuses. Like, let's go on an excuse resolution rampage, right?
Right.
Numbers don't lie, but people do. So if we can just kind of focus on spending, if you put the same energy into your excuses you put into selling that last policy or the last couple policies, you'd be in a whole different scenario.
Right.
And that's how I've always taken it. So, I think the big takeaway for me, for all you guys listening out there is, don't be mad at a salesperson for not hitting their goal. Be mad at them be upset, be frustrated, I guess is a better word, for them not coming to you and diagnose what's going on. And if somebody's continuously not coming to you, you have to either decide, are they good for your team, or do you need to put some checkpoints in that deal with evidence and facts along the way in their pipeline, not, randomization of everything's going great. And one thing I would say, we didn't really talk about this either, but when somebody says, oh yeah, I'm doing great, how many leads do you have in your pipeline? And if they can't respond to you with pretty close accuracy, you know that they're not really engaged in it, right?
Right, exactly.
They have to be able to say, this is how many I'm working on right now.
Yep. They should know everything, not just how many, but where they are in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So keep your expectations high. So real quick, just to kind of wrap everything up here. So we're going to have lots of show notes. The ebook's going to be in there, some of our other resources. We hope that you can subscribe. Love subscriptions to the podcast. Our next topic next month, I think, is going to be a doozy, right? So you're going to see a little role playing, I think, here with Kelly and Dave, which will be fun. Considering that our role-playing blog was one of our top ever. So I think it's number 2 in the list. If you want to check that out, we'll put that in our show notes. But we're going to talk about why we can't all just get along. Where is the difference between CSRs and producers, right? So how are CSRs and producers ever going to get along? Because I know it's a very common thing that we deal with. And, we're also asking for any requests. So feel free to reach out to us on our website, on social media. If there's something you want us to talk about, let's do it. We want to keep these very tactical, like I said. I do want to give a little shout out. So this month in January, I want to say thanks to Tom Davenport, again, from Blue Marsh, for having us out there on Martin Luther King Day. Awesome team, did a great training. He rented out like a conference room at a little resort in Pennsylvania. Super fun. So it's way to go for keep training your team and having us come out there. Awesome job, Tom. And let's just say that we can't wait to see you at our next podcast. So, Dave, it's been fun, and February's podcast, we're going to top this one, I think.
Excellent. Looking forward to it.
All right, guys. We'll see you soon.